start recording this now. So again, any questions from last week? We're talking about listening. The assignment 2 from last week was to gather a group of listening quotes.
So I have a question about, I did it, but I don't know if yeah.
Well, the idea was just to gather the quotes.
Just like.
Yeah, and pretty much you
Yeah,
didn't really
and
have
list
any
them.
certain format.
Just
You
as
need
I
to be printed
had
out.
in the instructions.
Okay.
Just list them out. Yeah. The ones I've looked at are fine.
I didn't submit it yet, but I will.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I just submitted mine right before 6 o'clock. Were we supposed to do something besides just the list of quotes? Because there was like other information in the directions.
Right. We're going to talk in class about grouping these these quotes into sort of related topics. Because there are lots of them. Some of them are rather tongue-in-cheek. The one I gave you at the very beginning of the class, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has been achieved. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's one of those joking on the square kinds of things because it's also quite true. And is also one of the biggest problems in all of our relationships. And some of the things we're going to be covering this week are personal relationships and communication in personal relationships. But we're going to go through that and we'll all participate. One of the disadvantages, of course, is that I may have to try and print out Amber, yours, and Stephanie, yours, so that the rest of the class can actually see them. But that's okay. I can do that and run pick them up. But the object with this week 3 assignment that we were looking at let's see, assignment 2 was it will turn into an in-class activity. The concepts of these quotes, meaning looking at listening or hearing versus listening, and some of the obstacles that we run into in listening. Several of the quotes that I've already looked at cover different sort of issues of listening, and that's really what I'd like to be doing today and have you work together on, is to understand that listening is a spectrum of cognition. There's listening to really hear, to really understand what's being said. There's listening to figure out how you're going to jump in and make your next comment. And all of us do that a lot. It's one of the biggest problems, I think, with having a conversation with people.
That's like something like quotes. Like when you're listening, it's not just a fine reading when you're going to talk.
Right. Yeah. What you're doing is plotting how you're going to counter the person, and you don't even actually hear. I can remember one time having one heck of an argument. Hello, Joel.
Hey,
Katie.
about 5 minutes and we'll come get you and have everybody go to the theater. So you guys can just chat and hang out until then.
Okay.
What do you want us to do? What are you going to do with Stephanie and myself?
Well, you'll just have to talk to me.
Okay.
He'll carry the laptop is what he'll
Yeah.
do. You just carry it, hold it in front.
Because we can't send you to the theater. But listening, one of the worst battles I had with the boss, and it almost cost me my job, was I was trying to tell. We were having an argument over some very, very, very bad miscommunication that had occurred, and I would start to say something and he'd jump in and tell me why I was wrong. And I finally had to yell at him, "Will you please be quiet and hear what I have to say before your brilliant rebuttal?" It shut him up. He got really, really mad. It shut him up. And then when I got done, he realized he hadn't a clue what I was going to say. And he didn't have to rebut any of it. But he wasn't going to listen because I was at fault. He had determined that. And when he found out the truth, he sort of felt like it turned a little kind of pink because he knew that he had really badly acted in front of not just me, but all of my workmates. And so it was really a classic example of listening with only the rejoinder in mind. And when that happens, you lose what's being said. And sometimes if you listen, you find out that the person is saying something entirely different than you've assumed. Remember, never assume you know what another person is thinking. Because remember, assume, as take that word apart, and you really make a fool of yourself sometimes when you make assumptions. So we want to keep that in mind. Listening is really an art form. Long time ago, I ran into a quote. I have no idea. It was some big name philosopher from, either from ancient times or from somewhere in the Renaissance, basically saying the person who says the most is the one who listens the most. Because by listening, I think I mentioned a movie last time called Being There. It was a Peter Sellers movie from 1979, I think. And it was about a gardener who rose to be an advisor to the President of the United States. Obviously, this is Hollywood. But rose to be a President of the United States because when he didn't have anything to say, he kept his mouth shut. And everybody thought he was so wise. And his wisdom was based on letting other people solve their own problems, come up with their own answers. And then thinking that this brilliant guy was saying, "Oh yeah, you've got the right answer." It was obviously a bit of a satire on our times. But there's a lot of truth in listening. Comments? We're just going to bide our time till they come and grab you because I don't want to get into something and then have to interrupt it. So listening is something that is probably one of the biggest barriers to communication, which is one of the reasons we spend some time talking about it. But as a barrier to communication, it's because we're not really listening. We're inside our own heads, thinking about something else, and that's not atypical. What was it that there's a quote on the page that I referred you to finally when I found out the other one you had to buy into, which wasn't the case. It wasn't what it was not what it used to be. James Baldwin saying that children never listen to their parents and then they imitate them.
I chose that quote.
You chose that? Great. It's a good quote. Because it is something that we act in the way we've been taught to act by the people around us. And listening, and kids especially, it's surprising how often kids hear what you say when you think they haven't heard a word or haven't listened. We have a rather embarrassing story, I'll tell you, because it's also funny. Our kids, when they were young, we used to try to take them anywhere and everywhere, but the issue was they had to behave. If we took them to a restaurant, and we started taking them to restaurants when they were like 1 and 2 years old, but they had to behave. And so we had a couple of really difficult times, and we stopped taking them out. And we told them that. So we're going to get you a babysitter. That's always an iffy thing because they love the babysitters. So, you know, for them, it was sort of like, well, we can't go out with mom and dad, but we've got the babysitter coming and we'll have a lot of fun anyway. And the babysitter will give us candy and soda and all this other stuff, which parents weren't good about. These parents weren't very good about. But one time, Elizabeth, our older daughter, wanted to go with us. And so we were with friends. And so Susan looked at her and said, well, you know what, if you go with us, you know what you have to do. And she came out with this seemed like 5-minute long list of the things she couldn't do. And we're sitting there sinking down in our seats and turning red and thinking, did we give them that many things? Ooh. And then they were both perfect in the restaurant. And after that, we didn't have much trouble. The other thing, another slightly embarrassing moment for me, our Elizabeth was about 20 months old, and I had a meeting in New Orleans. And so we all went, all three of us. And we were sitting. New Orleans is not a kid-friendly city. They don't like kids. I mean, it's not that they're not friendly. They're downright unfriendly. But we took her into this restaurant, a very sort of high-class restaurant. And the look on the head waiter's face, I mean, it was, if we had come in with a smelly, stinky horse, he would have been happier. And he looked at the kid, and so, and we said, oh, she'll be fine. And he, okay. So, can I get you anything to drink? And my 20-month-old sits up in her stroller and says, I need a beer for this entire restaurant. And again, on that note,
Yes, please.
on that note, it's time to go to the theater. Please take your computer.
Thank you.
To the theater.
We're not going to be long. It's going to be about 5 minutes, guys. Thank you.
To
so
the
much.
theater. The theater is lying.
And I will swear to this day that she never heard me say, I need a beer. Certainly not in a voice like that. Okay, I don't have any hesitation about speaking to you two together on this. The grade that I reported the week was over 100%.
Was over what? I'm sorry.
So neither of you have anything to worry about.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know I started freaking out. I was like, I have a B+. I was like, this is not okay.
Yeah,
Same.
Yeah, it shouldn't be okay. I guess, considering, especially since you're doing much better than both of you are in fine shape, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
And we'll whatever it is we have to get done, to make sure that your grade is properly recorded into the mod.
Are we going to have any other assignments besides our checkpoints and our final this week?
I want to take a look quickly and be sure that I don't answer you incorrectly.
Okay. Because I always plan it out my week and like I have my assignments like written down and I just want to make sure I don't have any more that I missed.
Yeah, the only thing, I haven't written it yet, so it's not showing, is there will be a final assessment.
Right.
That up. So don't worry. Yeah. So Yeah, plan your week accordingly. I think the only thing we're gonna have is tonight's exercise with the listening quotes and then a final assessment.
Okay.
But I also would like to, get some general feedback on the course, since we're really undergoing some modifications in the way it's being taught. But we'll
Okay.
do that when the entire class is together later on this evening.
Are you just gonna have us talk about our feedback, like the last day, or are you gonna have us do like a little assignment thing? Or?
Well, I've gone back and forth on that. I would like to get some feedback, and I'm debating as to how it'll happen. We might just do that, and just do it as a discussion. And I might ask that. Actually, it's probably not a bad idea. I might just ask that everyone just send me a short document, and I can set up a quick place to put it. A short document with any suggestions that you have. That would be probably helpful as well, but it certainly won't be any major. I'm not asking for a thesis on this.
Okay.
I just want to get a good feeling for what has worked and what has not.
Okay.
Have you all gotten your schedules for next mod yet?
Yes.
Okay.
We only have one class.
What class is that?
Anatomy, physiology 2.
Ah,
I haven't even looked yet. Will I have the same as you, Amber?
I would assume so because you're in anatomy right now, and since he said that Kelly said that we only have one class next mod because of our financial aid, we can only have one class.
Okay.
So I assume that you would be in the same way as us.
Okay.
Stephanie, look at Scarlett. Look what I did.
Aw, how pretty, baby girl. Did mommy paint your nails? Did she paint your nails pink? Are they pink? Isaiah hears you. Look.
Look who it is.
I'm potty training. Huh.
Isaiah.
Got the living room a mess, huh, Bubba? Can you say hi?
Say hi,
Don't
baby.
be shy. Can you say hi? That's Scarlett. You know Scarlett. Say hi. Look. Say hi. There you
Look
go.
at Isaiah. Oh, she's distracted. Come here. Come up here.
Friend? Huh? Yeah. Just say no to everything, and just like 2 days ago, he finally started saying yes when he means yes instead of no.
I know. Scarlett started doing that too. And the other day I was like, I love you. And it sounded like she said, I love you back.
Nice.
I was like, yes.
Isaiah will say more. Why you say I love you more? He says more. Bubba. You guys say hi again.
Yay.
Hi. Look, Scarlett.
It's Isaiah. Say
I
hi.
seen her at Walmart the other day, huh, baby? Yeah? Is that one of the dresses you got her? I can't tell. Or is that just
Oh no, this is just her bed shirt. I got it when I was in Vegas.
Nice. It's cute.
Thank you. I spent like $22 on it. I was like, this is outrageous. But I was like, I can't stop buying things for her.
I know. I feel like Alina has more clothes now than Isaiah ever has.
That's crazy. But that's a girl thing, I guess.
Yeah. You're not getting any more cheese. You're going to get constipated, baby.
More?
Look at your donkey.
I actually let her eat like spaghetti noodles last night instead of like, I usually make it with like bow tie or something so she can actually stab it with the fork.
Yeah.
And she literally just grabbed handfuls of it and dumped it all over. And I was like, I don't think you're supposed to have spaghetti in your hair, but I'm just going to let you keep making
Yeah.
it.
Hi. That's what Isaiah does, but spaghetti's one of like the only things I can get him to eat sometimes. So if he doesn't eat spaghetti, you know something's wrong with him. What? What? Your feet feel cold. Why don't you go get your baby sock? Yeah, baby.
The whole time, Mike.
I've been listening to the baby. It's all right.
Is it okay?
Yes, I'm going to run and pick up printed out copies of Amber and Stephanie's papers. So
Okay.
I will be right back. For the entertainment, Amber and Stephanie.
Oh, thank you, baby. What's this?
She woke up from her nap and acted like she didn't eat for like a year. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, you probably ate like 3 hours ago. Chill.
Hi. That's good though.
Oh yeah. Oh, she finally is
Oh,
waving.
Do you see how he has the living room right now? Do you see how messy this shit is?
Hey, that looks like my living room normally.
Oh man. Every time I try to pick up something too, he takes it out something else.
Yep. That's why I have that room upstairs. I'm like,
Yeah, he has a room, but he's never in it unless I'm in it. What, baby?
just wait till Alina's older.
I know. Oh my God. By that age, though, hopefully Isaiah will know how to pick up his toys and put them away for me.
Oh, well, I was saying that they'll probably tag team. and they'll like, look what I'm playing with. Look what I'm playing with.
Right?
80 toys later.
You heard the baby. Yeah. The baby.
Here. Do you want more? Just quit picking your nose. It's ucky. Ew. She wants me to like eat her boogers or something, and it's so disgusting. She'll like pick her nose and like come at my mouth, and I'm like, stop.
Gross.
I looked at her the other day. I was like, that's a whole new level of disgusting.
Oh my god. Isaiah hasn't done that yet, but he likes to stick things up his nose, like toys and stuff. So he's gonna be one of those kids I rush to the emergency room because he's stuck
With a
something-
Lego.
It's a baby, yeah. It's not hot, baby.
Was that Daddy? Yeah, that place at Loveland, what the outlets that I tagged you in on Facebook,
Yeah.
it wasn't very good.
No?
The pictures looked a lot better.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you get anything or no?
No.
No.
Nothing worth it.
That's good to know, though.
Yeah. But it could just have been because it's over today, so I got like the list.
A hit and miss type of thing, like Once Upon a Child.
Yeah.
Are you done eating? You want more bites?
Here.
Are you all done? Baby. Yeah, that's a baby. Actually, you guys are the same age. Baby. It's your baby Sissy. So that's Scarlet.
Scarlett.
Not hot, baby.
You're such a goob.
What are you laughing at? Little hands. Your kisses. Thank you. Oh. Why don't you go sit on the potty for me? Hey, why don't you go sit on the potty?
That's awesome.
Get the potty off your head. Oh my gosh, Isaiah.
What classes do you
What are you doing?
Just anatomy. What is it, billing?
What is it?
Go get your hat if you want something on your head, babe. Where's your hat? You know where it's at.
I figured the sooner we're done, the better off we are.
That's why I wanted to. Because our credits. and
Plus,
stuff.
we're gonna have Karen, and Karen's awesome.
Okay.
Oh, you know how to edit this?
Yeah.
I'm sure we don't have one couple of this. I'm not dead serious. I mean, yeah, I just more time for like 2 boys, especially with that class. Like, when
Yeah,
we're-
true, but, wait, yeah.
We're probably gonna come in and ask for help, so it's like impossible to find stuff.
Oh, I know, like I've been doing this. They got these-
Then my parents like, so he's like, oh, go this way, so I'm like, really? I can't.
Exactly, that's what. They always want to go out to eat during the week, and then they
Oh,
just
yeah,
want
well,
to chill on the weekend.
They're just like, I just wanna stay home on the weekend. I'm like, are you serious? My
Uh-huh.
day off.
I know, it's
I don't
like-
have anything.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I work, they're off school, but then they just want to see them.
I'm just like, basically just go every day.
Mhm.
I'm trying.
But that's all like tonight, they're like, because we live in Cheyenne, they came down here, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna have noodles and company. So I'm like, okay,
And literally,
like y'all could bring it
I
down.
know my mom's all like, because there's a place on the map where they sell fruit.
Mm.
And they're just like, we should just go there and like really mom. She's like, oh yeah, you have school. Like, you guys should know this by now.
And that's why it's always like, they always end up going out to eat during the week, or, you know, like, they'll like order pizza or whatever.
And when I come home, it's just, oh yeah, you can order pizza. I'm like, really?
They're like, or just find something we already ate.
And then I'm like spending my money. I'm just like, I'm spending my money. I'm so much work to do. Now I have to buy them something too.
And that's why if that's the case, I always like get it before I go home and eat it, and then
I'm gonna go ahead and make Snapchat. So it's like, get something. I'm like, go away.
like the other night they got KFC. I came home. The only thing that was left was the coleslaw. I was like, I don't want to eat that.
Also, my God, I need chicken too. Just next time come home with a really fancy plate. They'll be like, where's mine?
And like I get home and they're not home, they're out, and then I'm like, where are you guys at? They're like, oh, we're getting ready to leave so long. I'm like, oh,
Okay.
you forgive me? No, we didn't know when you'd be home.
I feel it.
Sure.
Talking to Christy. Yeah, just well, it's not possible to have two.
No, she's saying,
I have one. I have one. I have one.
no, what she's saying is she only has one class. And that's with us.
Oh, gotcha. So you're in your second round. That's not.
And we already have the second.
Yeah, we're still making some choices.
There's
She-
Alicia.
Okay, let's go ahead and work on this. We'll work on it until our first break. And then if we want to continue on it a little bit, we'll talk a little bit more. I have copies of Amber and Stephanie's quotes here. What I'm going to do is actually turn this a little bit to face over and ask you two to move over there so you can work with the entire group, okay?
All right.
I have copies here of Amber and Stephanie's
Why? No. Sorry.
so that your classmates who are remote can see it. Okay? I think she did.
You don't do well. Unless I'm taking a picture.
No.
And it fully stays over. All over. I have, okay, so I have a different form. I didn't type out like that.
Okay, how did you do that?
I don't think I did it right, but I still found quotes.
Well, you did it a little more creatively
And
than
they
than
all
I
have,
thought.
yeah, they all
So-
have the person that said I'm underneath it.
That's,
There's a couple like
okay.
unknowns. but-
Is that on a, is that
on a
on
Word
a Word document?
Yeah.
Go ahead and send it to me.
And just put my name up. in the
Yeah,
corner.
yeah, just send it to me.
I
And,
was gonna type it all out, but I don't have to.
yeah. And so that obviously the one with no name on it is Amber's. The one with the name on it says it's Stephanie's. So we'll accept that.
Are you kidding me? Alright. There's hail by the border, so I'm like, I hope it stops by the time I leave. It says giant size.
Did you want my name on it?
That's all right.
Okay.
Not a problem.
from Wellington to the state.
Going to State Line.
What?
Oh, lovely.
I'm in Wellington. That sucks.
Well, now remember, how long does a hailstorm last?
Yeah, that's why I was like,
It'll
I'm just
be
hoping
long
because
gone
it's
before
been
you
like
leave.
that all day in Cheyenne, like, then rainy. Yeah, so that's what I was just.
All right. So let's go. I've got the computer turned around so that at least you guys could see the other table, at least somewhat. All right. So one of the handicaps, of course, is that Stephanie and Amber do not have yours. So what I'd like you to do is read a quote, and let's decide as a group where you might place it as to what the sort of overall topic of the quote is. Stephanie's gotten a start on that on hers, where she actually grouped them a little bit into different topics. So that's why don't we, to make things easy right now, why don't we just start there, unless you can think of something different that is going to work as well.
No, I think that would be good.
Okay. So thank you, Stephanie, for getting us started on that particular part of it.
I didn't even know I was doing that, but you're welcome.
That's okay. We'll pretend you did know it and you just took the bull by the horns. So what we want to do is look at the quotations. Come in a lot of different ways, and they, as I said, some of them can be sort of kind of jokey. You know, James Baldwin is a little bit humorous. Children never listen to their elders, but they always imitate them. That's kind of humorous. It's also kind of true. But humor at its best is always true. But we're pointing out some things about listening. There's listening to plot what you're going to say next. You know, that's not listening. As I say, there's lots of quotes about silence being the best way to actually listen. But silence doesn't mean that people are listening. We all see that. Those of us that have kids, especially older kids, know that silence can be, they've just closed their ears. You know, you can almost see the fold of their ears in, you know, it's blocking everything off. You can almost see that because it shows in their eyes. Because we listen with our bodies. Our faces tell us whether somebody's listening to you or just sort of staring at you and not even seeing you, much less hearing what you're saying. And again, part of it depends on the topic being discussed. We all know from having those of us that have older kids know, have learned early on how to recognize when we've gone off into the parental rant stage and the child is no longer paying the slightest bit of attention. It's a case of, oh, Dad's at it again. Yeah, it happens all the time. You know, we're going through some of that with my daughter now, who's going to get married and go to Australia. Last night we were making a list of all the things that she absolutely had to do. Many of them to do with her own finances. But other things like selling her car. We're not keeping a third car. No. It's a Hyundai Accent, 2013. I don't know. We haven't even thought about that. But if you guys need a car, then yeah, I'll see what we want to sell it for. Except it probably won't be available till mid-July, late July. Oh. All righty. Well, you're on the list, Michael. Yeah. But, you know, things like that. Things like financial powers of attorney for her, for us to be able to do things for her. Things that you don't normally think of. So this list goes on, and at one point I looked at my daughter. We'd overwhelmed her, too many things. So we had to quit for a while, come back to it later. Sometimes listening as you talk, listening to the subliminal messages coming from the other person are as important as listening to the words. Because it will tell you when, like us, okay, we've overloaded her with all this stuff, and it's a lot. I mean, it's only 3 months away. So it's a lot that she has to do in order to move to Australia for God knows how many years. It's sort of, his business is filming automobile races and making TV shows out of it. That's what he does in Australia. And we've done some filming here at the raceways up and down the Front Range. It's quite an experience, believe me, to be standing behind the camera. Car races have no interest to me at all. But standing behind the camera and filming them and making a chore of making sure that I get it got more interesting. But, I've got 4 or 5 video cameras. I can only use one at a time. So what are you going to do with your cameras? That sort of thing. After a while, it gets pretty old. But, we all have that. But listening, it's sort of like listening is the key to understanding. So let's see what you guys have come up with. I haven't read all of your, I've taken a quick glance at several, but I haven't read in detail all of your documents. I apologize for that, but this weekend my mother-in-law was very, very ill, and we were concerned. We were busy. We were tied up. So I apologize for not really giving a good look at this.
Okay, now?
She's a tough bird, let me tell you. 98 years old, and she came back from what we thought was pneumonia.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, she's got a wedding in 3 months.
That'll do it.
She's not in your house.
Yeah, she's and her other granddaughter is coming from Denmark.
Oh my gosh.
She wants to see her too. So after that, it's a roll of the dice. But anyway, but again, I apologize. I did not give proper attention to the class this weekend because I was a bit on the distracting side. So anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
thank you for understanding. So go to it. Let's hear what some of you guys have as quotes.
Here we go. Wisdom is the reward you get for a lifetime of listening, but you would have preferred to talk.
Who did that? Who's that one?
That one there is Doug Larson.
I get any problem, big or small, within the family, always seems to start with that communication. Someone isn't listening.
Yeah. And who's that?
Emma Thompson.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Listen and silent are spelled with the same letters. Think about it.
Ooh. It's been a while since I've heard that one. Great. I'm glad you found that one.
That one was unknown, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unknown person.
I can't hear them speaking. I don't know what you guys are saying.
Okay.
Is there a way for them to come to us, or us to go closer to them so we can hear them?
Can you hear a little better now?
Can Michael say something?
Michael, say something. Let Michael talk, please. Okay. They just want to know if they can hear you, so speak up. Did you hear him?
Yeah.
Sorta.
Yeah. I just had to speak because he's always the person I can hardly hear.
Let's see if we can move this table a little closer.
Okay.
That's as far as it gets. Okay. Well, this is a bit closer, so Michael, would you speak again?
Is that better?
Oh yeah, way better.
Done. Okay, then we'll leave the table there. Okay. So, Elisa, you were gonna speak up so they can hear you, please.
Okay, too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential of life around. And that was yeah.
Wuskalia.
I got that someone.
Wuskalia, okay.
This one isn't anything about listening, but I kind of liked it. It says, why are our days numbered and not lettered?
Well, if you think about it, it is also lettered. You
Yeah.
know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
But dates, April 23.
What would it be?
Yeah, but you still have letters in April.
Oh, yeah, April.
There's a little bit of a pun there, of course. Our days are numbered
Yeah, I got it.
because they are. We have a certain amount of time on this earth. We don't know what it is, but we're all born basically with a death sentence.
Yep.
Right? Because we know that's where we're going to end up. We just don't know when.
Mhm.
You know, people like my mother-in-law at 98 never thought she'd be alive that long. So I won't tell you how old I am, so forget it.
I can guess.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
59.
okay, everybody, we're gonna take a
You
guess.
can guess.
It
59.
doesn't mean he's gonna tell you if you're right or
Yeah,
wrong.
true.
So you can tell us if we're close at least.
It's clearly 34.
It's 29.
That's what my mother used to say. I'll be 29 my next birthday.
Yeah.
Right up until she was 75.
I'm guessing you're at least 50.
Well, thank you. I'll say yes. I did start to gray early, but not quite. Anyway, my age is irrelevant. Anyway, let's go. More quotes.
Okay, I'm trying to find a good one that I have here. Any problem, big or small, within a family always seems to start with bad communication. Someone isn't listening. Emma Thompson.
Yep.
I thought about you when I read that quote on there because how you were telling us the story about like your mom and stuff. I was like, this sounds, I bet he's going to pick this.
You know me too well.
Good bet. Yep.
Your turns.
My turn?
Sure, why not?
Everyone wants to
We have it in front of us, but that's okay. You can go through your list and pick out one that you like.
So just like, okay, so just read one? Anyone?
Your random one.
Okay, so I'm just gonna read my first one. It says, I remind myself every morning, nothing I say this day will teach me anything. So if I am going to learn, I must do it by listening. That's my favorite.
So do I.
Yeah, right?
Very.
Yeah,
Because my first one as well.
yeah.
I'll be damned.
Mine doesn't say that.
Oh. Stephanie, your turn.
Stephanie, you up?
Okay, I think I'm going to choose number 6 on my list. Supporters who are effective listeners provide more direct eye contact and are receptive to disclosures and have more follow-up questions. I like this one, and it's just very accurate, so I guess that's why I'm going to choose that one.
Okay. Okay. Okay, Chad, you got another?
I have one that kind of dovetails with that some. Leaders can get stuck in groupthink because they're not really listening, or they're listening only to what they want to listen to, or they actually think they're so right that they're not interested in listening. That leads to a lot of suboptimal solutions in the world. Jacqueline Novogratz.
Yeah,
That also ties into the story you were giving us before we went to do the survey.
yeah. We,
I never got to finish listening to what your daughter's, what the response was to the waiter when your daughter said she'll take a beer.
the entire restaurant went dead quiet. I mean, and every head in the place staring at us. And we're sitting there saying, you know, oh, gee. What do we do now? So we laughed it off. I mean, what else could you do?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, but what it did was the waiter actually laughed. Because I'm sure he'd never heard a less than 2-year-old say anything like that. At least not in a voice that could have been carried all the way out to Bourbon Street. But yeah, he laughed, and then everything went back to normal. And we said, yeah, bring her some water and some pieces of lime. She loved to eat citrus. And the rest of the night in the restaurant, she was just happily munching away on the citrus. And we'd peel a shrimp now and again and toss it on her tray, and she'd eat that, and she was perfectly happy. And when we left, they didn't quite say we could bring her back, but they didn't tell us never to come back either. So there was, again, you know, the silence in the room was so profound. You know, but my daughter's good at doing that. So, anyway, what next? Let's have some other quotes. We're getting a variety here. I like that.
One advantage of talking to yourself is that you know at least somebody's listening.
I like that.
I kind of like that. And then I know people that don't even listen to themselves. You know, they'll say things and you'll say, what? And they'll, huh? You know, so, but yeah, right.
Sorry.
There's so many.
I read this one of my boyfriend. He goes, oh, when I say nothing, it means you should have listened the first time.
Ooh.
So quick that I understand. When I say nothing, it means you should have listened the first time.
It's also kind of like one of those things where when you tell somebody something and they're like, what did you say? And you
Should
say,
have listened the first
nothing.
time.
After that, or you say nothing, and they're like, and then they repeat what you said. It's just like, okay, so why do you want me?
Why'd you ask me?
Why do you want me to repeat it? You know what I said.
That's why he just agreed with that quote. He's like,
Well, sometimes you aren't quite sure if you heard somebody right.
You're asking for clarification.
Yeah. And in terms of communication thoughts, you know, the response is not just to say, what did you say, and then repeat it. It's, did you say? And somebody always will take that, well, yeah, that's what I said. Oh, okay. I just didn't quite understand it. You let it go at that, and you can short circuit lots of difficulties. So it's something that can be useful at times, especially if somebody says something that's completely off the walls to you. So, because it just might be off the walls.
So, I write while listening to music, not because the world beyond my headphones is too chaotic.
Yeah.
That's the so I can say something.
Yeah, that's an interesting quote. And I'm not quite sure what he means by it,
Can I say
to tell you the
why
truth.
about
Pardon?
that? Can I say why?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I kind of, like, when I read it, I kind of froze it, because I like listening to music when I'm writing,
Mm-hmm.
so it brings me to a different world.
Aha,
Does that make
okay.
sense? Mhm.
Yeah. writing is, believe me, I know this, a solitary effort. And there are some people that can sit in the middle of a railroad station and write because they can shut the noise out. And then there are others of us that can't do that. So, and it is very much a solitary, even if you're, the second book I wrote, I had 2 co-authors. And even when you're working with other people, you're working alone. You pass it off to them, you discuss it and everything. But the actual creating, the putting of words together is on your own. So I guess I can understand that now. Thank you. Thank you.
Related to your writing in Liberty Station, that's almost easier for me, not because I can shut out what the noise around me, but because that helps shut out the noise within me. So
Yeah.
I can-
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that before too. Yeah, there's a lot of voices that we carry with us. And sometimes it's good to have those voices have some help drowning those voices out. Yeah. Good. Have another one for us?
Yeah, well, it seems that the quotes I got had nothing to do with listening, and that was the first site that you gave us. But I like this one as well. Most people live their lives like criminals, act first, worry about the consequences later.
Indeed. Yes, Kelly?
Hi, Hope was first, and then when I'm done with Hope, I'm coming back for Felicia.
Okay.
We're gonna do a little swapping.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly.
Do it.
Okay.
It's one of me.
Yep, we can keep going around the circle, or we can do stars, or we can do anything you want.
I'll
I'm
say
fine
one.
with whatever.
I was like, I like. Can I say it?
Sure.
Listening is an art that requires attention over talent, spirit over ego, others over self. By Dean Jackson, I think.
Yeah, okay.
I can read.
All right.
Just
Great.
on Mondays. Sorry.
Not even on Mondays.
That was too easy. Okay, promise, just a couple minutes.
Okay,
All
Kelly,
right.
thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys.
It's easy listening to a record, but a live performance is so personal and real. Jen Wigmore.
Okay. Yeah, it's a different experience. Listening to a record is often a fairly solitary experience, but you listen to a live concert, you're rarely by yourself.
And even then, you're not even hearing the same thing.
No, you're not. No, a live concert's always very different.
I have a live concert in my shower every day.
I have an old joke about that. My singing in the shower is so bad, the water runs away from it.
I have another one. There is a difference between listening and waiting for your turns.
That is a great quote.
I think that should be around everywhere.
Yeah,
I think you and I have like half the same ones.
Yeah.
that's okay. It's
Somewhere
okay.
in the-
You know, you pick the quotes, generally speaking, you pick the quotes that actually speak to you some way.
Yeah.
So so listening to you guys recite these and reading the ones from Amber and Stephanie tells me a lot about the things that strike you all. And what's nice is that you seem to have a pretty balanced view of what listening should be. It's an interactive process. One of the problems we have in this society is we hate silence. I saw a movie last night called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams. And it's about the Chauvet Cave in France, where they found the most amazing Paleolithic art, 33,000-year-old art, twice as old as the oldest cave art we've ever found anywhere in the world. And they're absolutely astounding. And at one point, they shut off all the sound, and you know, from the people, everybody just was quiet. They still had the microphones and stuff on, and just listening to the little sounds from the cave. And you know, pretty soon there were some things that you might think were someone's heartbeat. And of course, you're in a cave, it gets amplified a little bit because many of those are just sort of, they're like amphitheaters, many of them. But it's really an amazing. If you get a chance, it's a documentary. If you get a chance to see it sometime, we checked it out from the library in Loveland. So it's really interesting, and the artwork is unbelievable when you think that it's been on the caves for 33,000 years. And they could even identify one of the artists of a number of the pieces because he left handprints everywhere and he had a misshapen little finger. So they found the same handprint all over. And just listening to that and going back and looking at that quietly and thinking to yourself, what, you know, there's no way to know what was going through the minds of people 33,000 years ago. Drawing these pictures of animals, and the artwork is amazing. It's real clear. It's not the stick drawings that we've seen from some of the other pictures we've seen of Paleolithic art, but they really are detailed drawings of these critters. But just the silence in there when people were quiet. And then the guy doing the film just couldn't stand it. He had to put a soundtrack to it. So we got a little bit of silence. But the problem in our society with silence is people are very uncomfortable with it. My daughter, and I use my family because of course that's where I have my experiences. When I was a young man was when Stanley Kubrick's landmark science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey was made. That came out when I was a sophomore in college. So that would have been about 1966. And there's one scene, he got a lot of it right. He used silence a lot because space is silent. Because there's nothing to conduct sound waves. So he's got a lengthy scene where we have the spaceship, the Discovery, going by. And I saw it in Cinerama in Washington, D.C. And so it was an astounding thing to see this thing go through half a room and it's dead silent. My daughter can't stand that because she loves the action movies. She's a big fan of the Marvel Comics movies and the DC movies and all that other stuff, Star Wars, which I like too. But this was just, the science behind it was very, very real. And that silence, the entire theater got nervous. I still remember that. The entire theater got nervous because it was just, is the sound off? What's wrong? Those of us that had some idea of what Kubrick was doing said, no, the sound's not off. That's what you hear in space. Nothing. So silence makes Americans nervous. Other societies don't have a problem with it. I've been in places around the world where we sat in silence for long periods of time, just being with the people that were there. And yet you come back here, and if it's quiet for 30 seconds, somebody has to make a noise. They'll cough, or they'll sneeze, or they'll start talking, or they'll start singing, usually off key, which drives me nuts. And they have to make noise. And Simon and Garfunkel song, remember? The Sound of Silence? Listen to the sound of silence. Because silence tells you a lot. If you're a hunter, you don't go out and make noise and you're blind. You want that deer to come up to you so that you have a good shot at bringing him down. So silence is not is more of the aversion to silence is more of a modern thing. I'm convinced than anything else. If you go to a place in France, when we were in France one time outside of Paris at the Cathedral of Chartres, where they have the walking labyrinth, which is a huge thing. You walk through it and pray and so forth. It's the only place I've been where people were deliberately silent, because you are silent when you walk through that. And it's inside the cathedral. So you're walking through this defined path. So silence is something that we don't do well. Now, silence and listening are two different things. The silence at a place like the Chartres Labyrinth is the silence of internal prayer. So you're not paying attention to anything. You're not listening to anybody. But the silence that you should have when you are in a situation where you need to hear what the person is saying. I mean, if you go to church, the priest or the minister or whoever is your pastor type gives a sermon. How many people are just real quiet and listening? How much noise is in the background? People moving around, kids are making noise. We expect kids to make noise. They don't deal well with that sort of stuff. But people move around, they whisper. If you listen carefully, you can hear a range of sounds, because people are having a hard time being quiet. So, I was thinking of something and I just lost it, so it'll come back to me maybe. Actually, it's 10 after 7, so it's certainly perfectly acceptable. I'll tell you, although this is close to our last class, I'll tell you that in my classes, it's perfectly fine to say, you're over time, it's time to take break. So let's take that break. Let's take that 15 minutes. So come back at about 25 after.
Hey, Michael,
Yes,
I have a question.
sure.
Since we're not, Stephanie and I are not really speaking too much, are we going to lose the participation points?
It's a little hard for you too. We're not giving you much of a chance, but no.
Okay.
No, it's always an interesting thing to try to integrate someone who's online into it and in class.
Yeah.
That's why I asked you guys to speak up at one point, just to make sure that you were included. So,
Okay.
but I'll drag you back into it when we get back from our break.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
I do have this one. As I got that sent in before we started talking. Just trying to steal as much time as I can to.
You need to. So please go through.
question, John?
Okay, we're on break now, Felicia.
Okay, sorry. I got like super excited talking to Kelly.
Well, I figured she didn't drag you out of here for no reason.
No, well, I got an email. She had to talk to me, but I got an email stating that I owed 50 for my monthly payment instead of 25. I freaked out a little bit. I was like, I agreed to $25 a month. Like, I can't pay 50. And so she told me that it was like just the current like mix up and stuff. But then I also got told that my scholarship that I got last month for $3,000 covers certain like the stuff I have to pay while I'm in school. So, because I only owed $1,900 while I'm in school,
Oh,
and I got a scholarship for $3,000. So I know. She said to just keep making payments for like the other financial loans, but for like the remainder off the financial loans, it's paid for.
okay.
I'm so excited. Less money that I have to pay.
Yeah,
It's great.
yeah.
And that was just
absolutely.
one scholarship. I applied to others that I haven't gotten yet, but
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're applying for scholarships, because,
I need to.
scholarship money is money you don't have to repay.
Scholarships and grants are my best friend.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I did this right because I went on like images online
Uh-huh.
and like copy and pasted them on here. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Like I submitted it to you.
I gave you an example, and I always like to see something different that can be used as an example for future work. So
Okay.
I have no problem with that.
Because I saw like, yeah, visit this website and then choose 10 to 15. I did 10, but because I did it like 41 minutes late, I for some reason thought it was due at like the 8:59 or whatever, like the end of the class
Oh, okay.
instead of 6. That's why I didn't submit it right away. But
Okay.
because I want to make sure with you that those pictures were okay before I submitted it.
Well, I saw that, so it's all right.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
I was like, it was here, it was saved.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna go to that.
I already wrote my discussion for the medical. I already wrote my discussion, so. I'm not worried about it. I just see what it says on there and I know that it's on the check point. Because the rest of it, I've got
The
to-
rest of that, that's the great report.
okay. I just
What's
don't like
gonna
that
happen
shows on
since
here.
there's confusion, at the end of the mod, when I get the grading done, I'll just send everybody an email, and tell them what their grade was.
I just don't like how it shows it on here.
I know. I don't like it either. But I haven't been able to figure out what to do about it. Other than constantly reassure the students that they're okay.
Has anybody told the dean that it's what it's doing, what kind of
We
grade?
discussed it, whether, I'll talk to her again,
So
probably.
the grade I have right now isn't official?
No,
Okay,
you still owe me some things. This is what you have right now,
okay.
which is, you can do better.
Hey, Hope. Did you get my text?
Yes.
Oh,
No.
I am doing it.
Yes, I got it.
Then
I hope you get it.
you are sitting.
I do too. I'm nervous.
But that's before.
They'll teach you everything you need to know.
So, okay.
I figured, but still nervous about the interview. I need this job bad.
Do. Like I said, when I first started, I was like, let's go, let's go, let's go, because I was used to working in the hospital and they had 20 patients still to go, and I had to learn to slow down.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I guess my job right now is pretty slow, basic. But I work with a lot of people, not just one person.
Yeah. You'll like it if you get it. I love my job. I love my job. Even though my client gets on my nerves sometimes repeating himself, but I just tell myself he's just got dementia, it's okay. Today he was talking about arranging his funeral.
What?
Yeah, he does that.
I wouldn't even know how to reply to that.
I said to him, I said, well, let's talk about that some other time. I said, right now we don't need to worry about it. And so then he would fall asleep. When we woke up, he started talking about it again.
Oh my gosh.
I pretended like he didn't say anything. I didn't even respond to it. Change the subject. Let me know how it goes tomorrow, okay?
Oh, I will. Oh.
After all the homework done for the middle class I did today.
It's not that hard. Like,
It's not hard, it's really easy.
Hope.
Yeah.
My job right now put me on a probation, basically.
Why?
Well, apparently I haven't been following dress code of business casual, and the only thing they told me I couldn't wear was this gray sweatshirt, and I was like, okay, so I quit wearing it. But apparently my whole wardrobe of everything I've been wearing for the last 2 months is on there, and they were like, if you wear any of this together again, you're gonna get fired. And I was like, freaking do it, dude.
They didn't even tell you it was 2 months.
No, I had this one outfit on there, and the manager or whatever, she was talking to me about making me to buy cardigans or whatever, and I was like, no, you don't pay me enough to go buy clothes for myself.
Right.
Sorry. And then the other manager said it was perfectly okay with what I was wearing, but yet that outfit was on there. So I was like, you guys are a bunch of BS. I hate you. I'm done working for you.
Right. Well, I really hope you get this other job.
Kelly made me
Me too.
Kelly made me pinky promise. It's like a perfect math, but okay.
congratulations.
Thanks. Did you just say
I
it?
just saw it.
What's that?
My scholarship from last month.
Oh.
I mentioned it to Kelly and she goes, you're posting it on Facebook. Like,
I was like, I was supposed to be, I was like, what? And then he's piping about it.
not like how the two people that like it are in my class right now.
Who was that? Chad.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Had a big hiccup.
Yeah, I just refreshed. Oh,
I know, that's what I did too.
And I sent Nikki a picture of how I want to do my hair. That looks disgusting. I watched it. It looks disgusting. A chocolate Whopper. It looks disgusting. I don't know, I'm gonna be doing stuff.
Nikki, how my boyfriend always messages me when I send him like non-stop messages.
Okay.
Yesterday he was at the same concert. I only saw him twice.
What?
Why? Because he was his friend.
Speaking of boyfriends, mine got hit by a car this morning.
Was he okay?
Yeah, he's very stubborn. He won't go to the hospital, and he probably has internal bleeding or something, and he won't do anything about it. That's gonna piss me off.
Sounds like every guy's.
Uh-huh. Well, he just doesn't want to lose his job because he smokes weed, and he was hit on the job.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's dumb. They legalize weed, but you can't.
Yeah, but you can't go to work.
I guess it's kind of like.
Oh, it makes us not be able to do it at work, but.
He doesn't do it at work.
Yeah.
He does it before to deal with the fuckers that he's got. Yeah. So he like legit got hit by a car. I don't even know like the whole situation on what happened, but he like flew up on the hood and into the windshield.
I would at least go get checked out.
He doesn't want to.
Because if they ask him how it happened, I got hit by a car. How'd you do that? Hit and run. I don't know what happened. But he's super stubborn. Oh. I have baby fever so badly, guys.
I do too.
Yeah, but I already have one.
I know,
So,
but I don't want.
okay. Do you want in? That sucks, bro. Enjoy the class in the hallway. Honestly, it also worked well. Boom. Another code. I just have to tell Kelly the code because she can't know it. Where'd the teacher go?
He's talking to Katie.
Oh, my what's happening? Alright, that's the one, like, where was this?
Oh, we can have a discussion for this class this week.
Do we?
I don't know.
I
I
don't
don't
think
see
so.
anything on there.
Is it sure about-
Oh, which one is that?
Yeah, I don't think we do.
That's awesome.
It's better than my other class where we have a presentation on the last day and we don't know what we need to do for it yet.
That's
So
And it's
tomorrow-
Monday. So last day's Thursday, and
We'll find out tomorrow in class.
We were supposed to find out last week, but
who's your teacher?
Dorothy,
Really?
she wasn't able to make it in last Thursday.
Oh.
No. Week 4, personal emotions. Week 4, overview. Week 4, reading and tools. That's it. What's in there?
What? I'm probably gonna add.
Oh, he
assignments.
adds assignments.
Mm-hmm.
I might as well just start my Learn Smart for this week.
I already have them done.
We've only got one more.
I can Learn Smart stuff pretty easily. What? Who just jacked my Dr. Pepper?
Me,
Who just gave you my ice cream?
me,
Who just gave you my ice cream?
me.
No, me.
Okay.
Or did you want this?
Not great.
Girl.
Don't wait. Don't wait.
Appreciate.
Mm.
He didn't show me my grade. He just said I'm doing okay.
He wasn't sure that's hard.
He just come up to me and told me I was doing fine. I said, I'm not worried about it. I just don't like what it says on the computer.
Great. As long as the 97% or whatever I have in there right now, 98. I just bit my tongue right now.
Like what? Hurt?
Mm-hmm. Like feel if I like pulled it the wrong way. I bit the ball.
Because if I had to score, really, I'd be upset.
Yeah, I wish I was sitting on a 70.8% right now with not having done anything for this week yet.
What does yours say?
No, that's mine. Based only on graded assignments.
Just off your checkpoints is what it's giving you a grade for.
Not just that, there's some other things, but
Wait,
What
what
else
is
it's a
it?
90% checkpoint.
No,
I am an 88. Why is my mother calling me right now? Madre, I'm in class right now. Hey. Love you too, bye. That's my mother for you. I called her at 2. She's just calling me back. Have a 95.
Did you turn in your LRA yet?
Yep.
What was the grade?
Way too much.
What was it?
Because I don't think I cited that correctly. No,
What?
I'm not showing you.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, it is. I think anything under 20 is okay though.
Yeah, or anything under 25.
But I don't like that because it was 0 last time I wrote paper and it did that.
Really?
It was 0%. Not even 1. So I did something wrong.
I don't, I'm fine with that.
18 is a lot.
Still fine. I thought it was gonna be like 30 or something. We made it seem like-
I'm not blocking. Special senses. I guess I should start reading about special senses now. Or lecturing about it tomorrow. Shanta really told me. Look, feel, touch.
No.
Okay.
She rated both of her discussions.
Yeah, look. Okay, that one.
All right, enjoy eating that. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Nothing.
Okay, I just had sorry I'm late coming back, but I was talking with Katie about this grade thing, okay? She assures me that we're going to take it up. I'm going to going to write up some stuff for her. We're going to take it up with the company. But whatever grade I report, they're going to back us up. And our concern is that grading goes in a couple of ways. I turn in a grade sheet with a grade, okay, and turn it into Christy. But
I can't.
in your system. Pardon?
You froze. I didn't hear anything you said.
Okay, Katie has assured me that the grading problem is not going to affect you guys. You'll get the grade that I give you, which is going to be the grade, by the way, that you earned. Okay, I want to acknowledge that you guys are earning. We don't give you grades, you earn them. Okay, and so you'll get the grade you earn. If there's an issue, we will take care of it. So if there is an issue and you don't understand what's going on, don't freak out. Just come to me or Katie or Chantel or Paul or Christy and ask. What happens when, at the end of the mod, I turn in the grade sheet, the Canvas is then pulled into the campus view system where we keep all of your records, and there's a grade there. And if there's a conflict, then usually they'll say, what's going on? I suspect, from what I've seen, since both of my classes have the same problem, I suspect from what I've seen that there's going to be a lot of conflicts. Fortunately, Katie, we will take care of it. So don't, if there is something that you see that doesn't look right, please just come and talk to us. Don't get upset. Don't get angry. Come and talk to us because we're on your side. Okay, and we're working on it. We've just started this process. We knew there were going to be glitches. I think none of us thought there'd be quite as many, but that's what happens when this happens, or when we do this. So so bear with us. But yes, you will not be the victim of any sort of computer glitch. Okay, so. Well,
Just
yeah. Yeah, please. Computers and walls don't do well together.
no, neither do phones.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not about.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other quotes that you really want to bring up before we start talking about listening in relationships?
When you talk, you're only repeating what you already know, but if you listen, you may learn something new.
I love that one. Yes. Yes.
And the first duty of love is to listen.
More of us could use that one on a regular basis, I think. One that Amber gave us, listening to your instinct while doing the eating can also be the hardest thing to do. All that listening to our gut, listening to our heart. I have always found that when my instincts say, yeah, I don't think so. We're getting a lot of clanking and banging. Sounds like a kid is having a lot of fun with a tin pot. Hey, thank you. Okay, so this one I like because the thing we don't, we listen on many levels. Our ears take in sounds, they go into our brain, where we think we're listening. Listen also consciously. There's a part of us that's evaluating. Okay, and that's why when you get this gut feeling that you shouldn't do something, or maybe you should, and you ignore it, altogether too often you regret it. Can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. And when I've started, and it took me a long time, but I started listening. Okay, my instinct is saying, no, this is bad. Don't do it. And it's turned out to be right most of the time. Because there's a part of our brain that is integrating all this information and is processing this information that we're hearing. And it's talking back to us, sending us signals. So that's one of my favorite. Listening to your instincts, while being the easiest, can also be the hardest, because our instincts often tell us to do something or not to do something that we want to do. And we go ahead and do it anyway, hard-headed us. And then we say, oh, well, shouldn't have done that one. You know? And I can't speak for anybody else, but I know it's happened to me more than I want to think about. Okay? So,
I have one.
go ahead.
Okay, so another one that I have that I really like is listening is being able to be changed by the other person.
Yeah.
I like that one a lot just because, like, if you actually, like, a lot of people I feel like has to do a lot with, like, influence. And so, like, if you're listening to someone who's, like, giving you, like, a lot of, like, good advice about certain things, then they can help change you, I guess. I don't know.
No, I think we've got it exactly right. But you have to be able to hear. You know, here's where listening and hearing, you have to be able to hear and integrate that advice. But yes, listening is being willing to be changed by someone else, because listening means that you are detaching yourself from your preconceived notions. That's how we learn. We have a lot of preconceived notions. Our society is absolutely full of them. And yet, if we listen to someone else, it may help us look at those preconceptions and say, why did I believe that? Or why did I think that? So that's a real good one. That doesn't mean you should be so wishy-washy that somebody says, oh, the sun isn't shining today and you're seeing shadows, that you believe them, right? But it does mean, oh, really? Why do you say that? So, and then looking at it. This is the basis of anyone who ever goes into counseling. This is the basis of counseling, really, is helping people detach themselves from their preconceptions so that they can actually hear what others are saying. It's one of the real big issues we have everywhere in the society, throughout the society, with making decisions, with making discussions and making plans. And you know, politics is rife with this. They don't listen to each other, and they're certainly not willing to be changed. You know, there was a story that circulated, and it's been confirmed by several people, that when President Obama was elected, a group of conservative Republicans got together and just said, we're going to oppose everything the man wants, even if it's for the good of the country. Now, what kind of thinking is that? And nobody looked at him and said, you're crazy. And that's why we had 8 years of mess, was because a group of people decided it didn't matter. They were not going to listen. And, you know, that's a reality. I'm not making that up. That is widely quoted by a number of people who have since quit politics. Another one, go ahead.
Sorry, I had one more.
Yeah, please.
Tone is often the most important part of the conversation, and listening is so much more important than what you say.
I love that one too. Yeah, tone. You know, there's lots of ways to say things. You know, you can say, you know, you're a great person, or you're a great person. Tone says a lot. You can say it in a way that's sarcastic, in which case somebody says, yeah, right, you're lying. Or you can say it like you mean it. And tone has a lot. And some people have trouble with tone. And part of that's because you know, where do we learn these things? We learn them from our families, our peers, the people that we choose to admire. We learn our tones from those that are around us that influence us because we think that's the way to be. So if you're around someone whose tone is always pugnacious and nasty, guess what you're going to turn out to be unless you really work at it. Okay? So yeah, tone is a lot. And in fact, that's why tone is one of the reasons that I was suggesting to you last week, Hope. You know, say that in a nicer tone, please. It really sets people back when you do that.
It wasn't the tone that he used, it was the words he used.
Yeah. Then you say, can you use nicer words? Can you use a pleasanter form of address? You know, if you do that without screaming, it's hard to do sometimes. If you do that without yourself moving into the negative tone universe, it often slaps people upside the face with a wet fish. And they will, because they're not listening to themselves. The other thing I've often wanted to do was just record every conversation I have. That seems kind of unfair, but it is perfectly legal, by the way. As long as one person in a conversation knows it's being recorded, the other person doesn't even have to know, much less give permission.
Depending on the state.
Colorado, it is legal. And in many states, it's legal.
Yeah, there's a number of them where both parties have to be aware and consent to it.
Yeah. Well, you know what that does? It makes people behave. Oh, you're recording me? Well, I better be careful here. Not threaten to call out the leg breakers. You know, that sort of thing. But, you know, tone is critical. And it's easy to have a nasty tone. It's easy to have a sarcastic tone. Sarcasm is one of the most dangerous things to engage in, by the way. Do you know what the word sarcasm is derived from? A Greek word, which has its roots in a phrase that means to rend and tear flesh as by a wild dog. That's what sarcasm is. And if you think about sark and where it's used, sarcophagus, sarcoma, it's all associated with death. And yet some people think sarcasm is absolutely hilarious. And when I started thinking about where the term comes from and listening to what sarcasm does to people, I stopped as much as I could using any sarcastic form of address because it really is negative. It can be hilarious if you're not on the receiving end. So, you know, just tone, and even when you think it's benign, if someone's having a hard day and you laugh at them, how are they going to feel?
Miserable.
Totally disrespected, right? You know, your feelings don't matter. You think it's funny that I'm hurt because of something that happened. Yeah. So, you know, it's hard to know, but communication is so much about tone. And I really thank you, Michael, for bringing that one up. Okay. And one last one I wanted to throw out is the best way to persuade people is with your ears, by listening to them.
I was debating on saying that one.
Yeah.
I had that one.
Yep. Yeah, I'm reading it off yours, Amber.
Oh.
It was by Dean Rusk, who was John F. Kennedy's Secretary of State. So, this, I want to just end this discussion now unless someone has anything else they'd like to say.
I have one.
Okay, and
If you make listening and observation your occupation, you will gain much more than you can by talking.
yes. Yeah, so there's an awful lot here about how we can understand more by listening. Right? An awful lot. So, thank you all for participating, all of you for participating and being a part of this discussion. It was fun. Now I would like to switch gears and go into relationships. I would like to start this off by being quiet and listening to you guys tell me all the different kinds of relationships you can think of that we have. Talking about interpersonal relationships, and I'd like to leave the pets out of it and other things. We're talking about interpeople relationships. Okay, pets is a different subject that we can go into it in maybe another time. So, what kind of relationships do we have? Yes.
I was answering the question.
Okay.
I said like your mom and dad.
Right.
Or like your boyfriend or significant other.
Okay. And Felicia said children. Yeah. Okay.
Friends.
Friends. Yeah.
Coworkers at work.
My residents at work.
Right. Your clients.
Co-workers.
And coworkers.
Rivals of all kinds.
Rivals of all kinds.
Your enemies.
Yeah.
No, not even this. No, that's true. But
Nice. I love it. Okay. Pardon?
Our classmates.
Classmates. Yes. You guys have formed a set of relationships here. Now, listening to the conversation between Stephanie and Hope a little while ago. Oh yeah, you're probably in my class. So yeah, so there's a relationship there.
Teacher and students.
Teacher and student, that's a different kind of relationship. Elisa, you have any examples? Any ideas that you'd like to throw out? Pardon? Siblings. Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, Stephanie and Amber, you have anything else to add to that list?
I do not.
I don't either, not at this time, no.
Okay. Okay, so we've covered pretty much the gamut. There are close relationships and distant relationships. Now, do any of you feel you have a relationship with our political representatives in Washington? Yeah, you do. They represent you. You vote or don't vote. That's part of the relationship. There's an old joke that if God wanted us to vote, he'd give us candidates. But the issue is there is a very distant relationship there because they have an effect on you. Now, somebody I'll just pick a name that you don't know. David Price, living on a farm in Nebraska, whom none of you know. You have no relationship with him. Thanks, Felicia. I was waiting for somebody to say that one. Thank you. But yeah, you don't have a relationship with him directly, or even in a 6 degree of freedom way, probably. But our relationships and the way we relate to them depends on how close they are. Our relationships to our significant others, spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, are different from our relationships with our close, non-intimate types of friends. Okay? They're a little different. Our relationships with our kids are different. Your relationship with me is different from your relationship with each other. This brings up a part of the chapter. They talk about voluntary and involuntary relationships. A voluntary relationship would be friends. would be significant others, lovers, if you will. Would be, those would be voluntary. We choose to have those. An involuntary relationship, one example is teacher to student. You didn't have a choice as to who was going to teach this class. Right? The only choice you had was to walk in the door and say, I don't like him, and leave. And go drop the class with Christy. Okay? Or just stop coming to class. But you didn't have any choice. So that's an involuntary relationship. Involuntary relationships aren't bad relationships necessarily. They just are relationships that we have because of relative proximity. And involuntary relationships can develop at work in terms of you're working away and you get a new boss. You didn't choose the new boss, probably, unless you work for an extremely democratic company where they all decide who the boss is going to be. And there are places like that. There's a wonderful story about a company in Minnesota, 23 employees, and everybody was equal. There was no CEO. There was not, everybody just did their work. They would get together, decide what was going to be done, and do it. And people that had certain abilities and certain proclivities would go off and do various jobs. And one was a woman who was their chief salesman. She went off and went around, and she would go out and she'd have her business card, just have her name on it. What's your title? I don't have a title. They didn't know what to call her. They didn't know what to call her. So she goes back to the company and she says, you know, folks, I need a title. Why do you need a title? Nobody knows what to call me. So they don't take me seriously. So they said, pick a title. So the title she chose was Commander-in-Chief. She wrote that on her business cards, and all of a sudden everything was just fine because now they could put a label on her. Okay. You know, silly, but you know, one of those little stories. So the issue with, and then the voluntary relationships obviously are marriages and friendships and those sorts of things. To an extent, there's an involuntary component to parent and child and sibling to sibling relationships. Now, one could argue that the parent chose to have the child, so that was voluntary, but the child didn't choose the parent. So that's involuntary, right? So you
Couldn't there be like a involuntary marriage, right?
There are arranged
Because some marriages are arranged and they don't get it.
Yeah, and arranged marriages. The theory behind arranged marriages, really, the official theory is that you get the right match for your child. The real reason, of course, is that marriages throughout history have been arranged for political and economic reasons. But that carried over into other societies. We have a lot of arranged type marriages. I'll give you an example. A cousin of mine on the East Coast, when he got married and they had their daughter, they decided that they wanted their daughter to marry the right guy. So they put her in the right prep school. They put her in the right places so she would meet the right people. They were arranging for her to meet the right person. Okay.
But she voluntarily.
I don't have any idea how that worked out because the last time I saw her, she was about 6 years old. They were already doing that, and she was 6. And my wife and I looked at each other and said, well, we're not going to do that to our kids. Yeah. And we didn't. But in our faith, we have to give permission for marriage. And the theory is that it's maybe a better match, right? Divorce rate in our faith is the same as the broad society, so it doesn't matter. But there is some other input that goes into it. So, and we have some very, very close friends, Indians, subcontinent, you know, what we call red dot Indians, right? Subcontinent Indians. They're from Chennai. He came over to the United States and we were his host family when we were in North Carolina. And he went back to India and got married to the wife that was chosen for him by his father. And into our life comes this utterly gorgeous woman. And they had it was a good marriage. It's been very successful. And yet we met another couple one time, an arranged marriage, and they hated each other. The only reason they stayed together is they had a little girl that they were raising. But they hated each other. And it's just, so arranged marriages are done, but they're not, and you're right, it's going to be an involuntary arrangement or an involuntary relationship. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. But the other kinds of involuntary relationships are just strangers you bump into on the street, or you go into a restaurant. There's a server there. You have basically an involuntary relationship, temporary, unless you go back a lot. But you have an involuntary relationship there. So it's people that you don't choose specifically to be involved with, but who are thrust into your life in some way. But we talk to them all differently, and we communicate differently. So let's talk about different ways of communicating. How do you communicate with, say, your significant other and your children? Some of you have children, so I'm asking that question. I know not all of you have children. Yeah.
I don't talk to my children the way I talk to my boyfriend by any means.
Right. It's a relationship.
It's different. I sometimes use like the same pet names. I guess you could say like sweetie or sweetheart or babe. I call my daughter babe sometimes too.
Oh yeah, I call Scarlett babe all the time.
Yeah. We all have nicknames.
Same kind of names, but not necessarily the same context.
Right. We have a developing friendship with a young couple who moved here from North Carolina. They have a 2.5-year-old, and when I talk to the 2.5-year-old, whose name is Eden, sometimes I call her Eden, but sometimes I call her Honey. Well, guess what I call my wife sometimes?
Eden? That's
Eden. Good one. I should have seen that coming. Yep. I'll try and remember to do that, and I'll tell her you suggested it. Great.
I guess I talk to my significant other as like more financial stuff. Like I'm not going to talk to my 1-year-old about what bills are due this week,
Yeah.
I talk about like fun things with her and what we're going to do tomorrow and get her all excited so she goes to sleep.
That works. That's
It
good.
actually, it does. I'm like, you need to go to bed so we can go to the park tomorrow, or we can go outside and play with the chalk. We're just gonna have so much fun drawing trees on the sidewalk, and it gets her to bed.
Great.
I wish that worked for my daughter. She doesn't bug me about it. She's up all night. What time should
I guess it's because my daughter's also younger than yours, so she doesn't really understand, I guess, like she understands, but she doesn't understand the same way as your daughter because she's older.
Yeah, 12 hours is still 12 hours, but
Yeah. Well, there's the anticipation factor that's there too. But yeah. Okay. So yeah, you definitely use different. Talk to your kids about different things, but you also use different tones of voice.
Okay.
Yeah, not always. I mean, don't take anything I say as being an absolute all the time thing, because it isn't. But you will use a different tone of voice for your kids a lot of times than you will for someone else in your life. And it's not good, bad, or different. It's just we have a different relationship with them. Have any of you seen the book, The 5 Love Languages? Have you ever read that?
I did. I actually have it.
Oh, good.
It's on my kitchen counter.
Yeah, okay. So,
It's really interesting. It's a very good book on how all that works.
people, language has a lot of different facets to it. And people, we have what's called a love language, the thing that someone really wants to get from the person who loves them. And there's a series of them. Everybody has slightly different versions of that, but can be boiled down to some people like gifts, some people like touch, some people like service, acts of service. There's just a lot of different things. But just like people have different languages of love, then we communicate differently across that spectrum of relationships. You don't expect to, suddenly treat someone that you've just met on the street a long lost member, right? Unless they really are, I suppose.
Like my significant other and we were having problems with communication, so that book was recommended to me. So every night we read one chapter out of that book until we finished it. And then we took like the quiz at the end of the book or whatever. Mm-hmm. And my language was acts of service, and his was receiving gifts. So I had to figure out how I was going to receive gifts, give him gifts to make him feel important, and then how he was going to have acts of service to help me feel important, I guess. But I mean, the book really helped with the communication side of it.
I'd like to borrow that book.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's really an excellent book. I would recommend it for anyone, just so you can understand when you are not communicating that there may be a clash of needs going on. And that's something that's so easy to fix. Usually. Sometimes it's hard for people to change, because if it's something that conflicts with what you perceive as your own love language, it can be hard to think in terms of the other person's. But it's worth having. So thank you, Amber. I appreciate you bringing that out on this one. But the issue is that all of our relationships do vary, and our communications vary. Part of it is understanding the personalities. We have some very good friends in Fort Morgan. The reason I was talking about sarcasm earlier is because her humor is almost all sarcasm. And we actually had the opportunity to have a talk about what that is, where it comes from, and how it can be very, very destructive. And she's made an effort to curb that a bit. It's hard for her. She's been doing it all of her life. And she's not quite my age, but she's not young either. So she's been doing it all her life. And it's hard for her to change that tone. Those of us that know her deal with it. But somebody randomly meeting her doesn't do well. So again, what we want to do is know the people around us and know them well. So how do you think, how do you talk to different people? When you meet someone that you've maybe known for a while, as a casual acquaintance, one of those voluntary acquaintances, maybe a neighbor or something, that you see once in a while, how do you talk to them differently than you talk to the members of your family?
I talk to them more.
You talk to them more?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I talk to them less.
And you talk to them less? Okay.
I think I don't give them as much information as I would to somebody in my family, because they know me better than this friend and a stranger.
Mhm. I think that's pretty typical. Yeah. Pardon? You just don't talk. And you are not a very, what I would call volatile person. You don't talk a lot, but that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. And I have, I've seen people who are quiet be mistaken for, oh, she never talks to me, she doesn't like me. So somehow or another you have to convey that you don't dislike them. Maybe they're not going to ever be your best friend, but it'd be useful. Yeah. And you can do that with body language, a smile when you see them. And maybe a, hello, how are you today? And then you keep on going. There's a lot of our neighbors. We see our neighbors, a lot of our neighbors walk in our neighborhood. So we see them, a couple of times a week walking by the house. And the conversation is always the same. Hi, how are you today? Very shallow, but also not dismissive. So we all have a reasonably good view of each other, but we have yet to invite some of these people in for a cup of coffee, which would be the next stage if you were going to develop a friendship. Hey, stop in sometime, let's talk. The only neighbors that we were getting close to doing that moved out 2 weeks ago, unfortunately.
Darn, so close.
Yeah, that's the way it was. They're good. Or to help me garden. Yeah, it was fun. But
I guess
go ahead.
I always talk more like up front with my family than I would like just a neighbor. And normally it's just like when I talk to my neighbor now, like I don't know him very well since I just like moved here. And it's kind of just like the short, simple conversations, not like I would like my mom, like I don't know. I'm more straight up about everything, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there is. Remember the self-disclosure discussion we had in the first week?
Yeah.
Well, self-disclosure is part of our communication, right?
Right.
Of course, your self-disclosure is going to be much greater to people who are much closer to you. And not to, how would you feel if you met a person for the first time and they started just laying out all the troubles of their life? You'd be a little embarrassed, I think.
That'd be almost awkward.
Yeah, it'd be awkward. Really didn't want to hear it. So it's natural. Pardon?
You get used to it real quick, though.
Well, if you're around people who do that, yeah. When I was a kid, the hippies used to be honest. It used to drive me crazy, which meant that you got to hear about every time they had a hangnail. I mean, it was just awful. Now, I'm just being honest, man. How about a little honest silence? But well, there is a place for that too. But well, people, can put each other off. So we are reticent. We are a little more hesitant to open up to people that we first meet. But as we get to know them, we start exchanging more. The conversations become more involved. I won't say more intimate because that implies something, but more personal. You start talking about, recently, well, not recently, it was last summer, or last fall, we had a deck put on our house. It was put on by Volunteers of America. They provided the labor and we provided the materials, and they built the Cadillac of decks. And so that's attracted some neighbors. That's a beautiful deck. Where did it come from? So it has caused some conversation in the neighborhood. Where did you get that? That's beautiful. Did you build it? Oh, are you kidding? I would have built something that would have probably fallen apart in a week and a half. But, just, not, probably not, but it wouldn't have looked anywhere near what a bunch of retired professional carpenters did in 2.5 hours. But the issue was, it was something that brought a little connection into the neighborhood. That's beautiful. Where'd you get it done? Oh, well, I'm thinking about moving my mother in. Maybe we'll have them do that. Go for it. We told them. So it gives us an opportunity. And when we are developing these relationships, we start more into that self-disclosure. We begin to disclose more about ourselves. We get to know them better. And we get to know that the more we get to know them, the more we tell, and vice versa. Up to the point where people are comfortable stopping. There is a point in any relationship where there's a barrier. You meet your neighbors, you get to know them. You're not going to talk about really personal, intimate things that go on in your life with most people. Most of us are a little bit hesitant about that idea. And it doesn't matter how close they are. If they're not on that plane, those topics are just not part of the conversation. But our relationship with them can be very, very good. But we are not likely to still use the same tones of voice that we use with those closer, or even the same words. Because our conversation with our very close people, we have buzzwords. We have terms that we know and we can use and have meaning for us that have no meaning for someone else. Even though they may be perfectly good words in another context. So communication, one of the biggest problems in interpersonal relationships, and one of the biggest issues that bring about the demise of these relationships is communication. We don't communicate well. We don't talk. Successful relationships, and quite frankly, relationships that are not successful for other reasons can have the same problems. But successful relationships, one of the prime characteristics is the ability to communicate. Even if it's about things that the rest of us might feel is totally trivial. One of our neighbors is a shop teacher at school. He does shop and mechanical, metal working and woodworking and stuff, and auto shop at one of the schools. And he has a side business doing sprinkler systems, startup, blowouts, repairs, and everything. They live a couple of blocks up from us, and I was walking by their house one day, and I looked over, and there he is in the garage, along with their 2 Mazda Miatas. I walked up, and I like Miatas, they're cool cars. I walked up and was talking to him. Turns out that he and his wife raced them. They go to the Western Slope and race their Miatas. I never would have thought that about them, either of them, especially not her. Now, having said that, we have a young lady in the daytime program here at the school who is a champion drag racer, and she's 19 years old. So, I'm not stereotyping her, it's just that I don't, and one of the most talented track racers in the state of Colorado is a 14-year-old by the name of Maria Bedreau in Pueblo. And she is an unbelievable driver. It's not that it was that I was surprised that she drove, it was that I was surprised that she drove. She doesn't have that feel when you talk to her. She's a school teacher, a great school teacher. You don't think of grade school teachers as racers. You just don't. Why? I don't know. Bias, prejudice, who knows? But so we can talk about that, but there isn't a whole lot else we can talk about. We can't talk politics. We can't, there's a lot of things we wouldn't talk about. I'm not interested in some of the other things that he does. But we can talk cars. And we can talk about racing because I happen to know a little about it. It's not my bag, but I know something about it. So there's a bit of a relationship there. But it's very different than talking to some of our other friends in town where we have much more intertwined lives because we see each other a lot. We socialize together. So it's a real different relationship. But it's just, and the way the conversations are pretty shallow with our neighbor, and they can be much deeper with others. So, and that's, all of you have those, I'm sure, in your life. You have people that your relationship is real surface. Nothing wrong with that. You can't, I don't think a healthy person can have real deep relationships with a whole lot of people. I think it takes too much out of you. My personal opinion. Now, some psychologists might argue with me. I don't know. I don't care. That's my personal opinion. And maybe that's because I can't do it. That might be my personal opinion from my perspective. Nonetheless, it's very difficult to have the real kinds of close relationships with a lot of people. That's why we are supposed to be monogamous in this society. It's hard to have a close relationship of that sort with more than one person. It never has worked out in the past. No society has been successful with polygamy, ultimately. So, that's why we don't do it. Not for any religious reasons, it's just that you cannot possibly have those kinds of relationships work. You can't have the same relationship. So we have, but we can have that with multiple children. We have some, my daughter has a family that goes, that's at Ridgeview here in Fort Collins where she works. They have 11 kids. It's a great family. Every one of the kids that I know is one fine human being. There's 11 kids with the oldest just graduating from high school, 18. No multiple births.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
How many?
11. Wow. And those kids are fabulous. They've been well raised. They obviously are well loved, have good relationships with their parents. So, but the relationship between the two parents is obviously very different than between the parents and the kids. And with 11 kids, you don't have time for a whole lot of other people in your life, really. But nonetheless, there's a different level of communication. The relationship that my daughter has with the older of the kids who work a lot with her in the theater department at Ridgeview is very different than with the kids that are not a part of that group. Again, proximity and mutual interest. The kids that are not involved are the ones that really don't care about that. And believe me, it's good that not everybody wants to be in theater. We got enough drama in life as it is. But it really, so the communications are different. And the relationship between my daughter and the mother of these kids is such that the mother is actually sewing her wedding dress. And that'll be interesting. It's using silk that my mother-in-law brought back from Japan in 1948. So it's been ready to be used for the last 60 years. 68, close to 80. So anyway, questions? We're getting close to the end of class. So, there will be a final. I haven't written it yet. There will be a final on Wednesday night. What I would like you to do, I'm going to put up just a short assignment. What I would like you to do is, everyone, I would like to hear your feedback on how you think the course went. I'm not asking you to write an APA paper. I'm not asking you to write 500 words.
Thank
But I am asking you to, I will put it up in the shell, a little assignment Dropbox worth a few points. Give me some feedback on the course, how you think it went. We're still, with this position, we're still trying to figure it out. And you really, if you want to, you can say something about the grade issue, but you don't really have to. That one I've already passed up the line. It's there. It's taken care of. But if there are other things that you think could go better, or if you think that some things were really useful, let us know. Because I have no idea who's going to teach the class in the future. We just hired a couple of new Gen Ed instructors. So they may send me back more to medical. But, would you let John in, please? Oh, thank you.
Do you want it, do we have to do it, can it just be like one page, whatever,
Oh, yeah.
or do you like
Yeah,
the title page and
it
all
can be a
that?
short paragraph.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing, I don't want you to spend a lot of time worrying about that. I would just like to get some feedback on this and how it's gone.
Is that our only assignment this week?
That's the only assignment this week.
Yay.
We will just have the final.
So we're doing the final here in class on Wednesday?
I will do the final in class on Wednesday. It will be in Canvas, so Stephanie, it'll be available to you Wednesday evening.
The final?
Yes,
I can't do it in class with you guys on Wednesday?
if you want to come, or if you want to do it at class time, that's when it's going to be available.
Okay.
All right? Okay. It'll be available then, so we'll do it in class on Wednesday. So, any other questions or comments? Then have a nice couple of days, and we'll see you on Wednesday night. Thank you all. It's been a fun class for me to teach.
I like it.
It was a little different from anything I've ever done before. So I've enjoyed it.
I know, I enjoyed it.
How long is your doctorate?
She's been there, this is her second formal year, but she volunteered there for 3 years before that.
Okay. My sister went a long time back. My mom was working for a while. Used to be able to go to her all constantly with her productions.
Okay.
Like, kind of just curious, just in case.
No. I'm sure your sister also doesn't want to let kids.
No.
She's lost.
Okay, well, I'm going to shut this down, stop the recording, and close out the class. Looks like everybody's gone. If I can get some help moving this table.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.